The little black girl told the biker she saw a stranger pull someone into a storage hatch beneath the gas station. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. It was a humid and quiet evening at the gas station, the air heavy with the smell of gasoline and the hum of neon lights. It had been a long day for the bikers who had just pulled in to grab some fuel after a cross-country ride. The soft whirring of the fuel pumps was the only sound, breaking the otherwise still night. Just as they were about to head inside to grab a bite, the screeching sound of a young girl's cry echoed from across the parking lot. The girl, no older than 10, was running full speed toward them, her tiny legs struggling to keep up. Her braids flew wildly behind her as she stumbled on the pavement, eyes wide with fear. The bikers froze, sensing that something was terribly wrong. The girl's face was covered in tears, her breaths coming in ragged gasps as she reached the group of bikers. She ran straight to the leader, a tall man with a gruff face, his tattoos covering most of his arms. Please help. A man took someone into the storage hatch under the gas station, she cried, her voice breaking. The leader, known as Jack, bent down to her level, his weathered eyes softening as he placed a hand on her trembling shoulder. What happened, kid? He asked, his voice calm, though a storm of thoughts was brewing in his mind. I saw him. A stranger. He pulled a person into the hatch beneath the station. I tried to stop him, but he was too fast. Please, you have to help them. The urgency in her voice struck Jack like a thunderclap. The other bikers looked at one another, exchanging knowing glances. They had faced danger before, but nothing like this. Without hesitation, Jack straightened up and looked around. At his crew. We're going, he said, his voice firm, already moving toward his bike. The sound of the engine roaring to life echoed in the otherwise quiet night. Get the rest of the crew. We need to move, now. Within moments, the bikers were all in motion. Their bikes rumbled to life, and the atmosphere around the gas station seemed to shift as they prepared to confront whatever danger was lurking beneath that hatch. But the question remained. Who was the person the stranger had taken, and what were they about to uncover beneath the gas station's concrete floor? As the engines roared louder and the bikes lined up, the girl stood there, eyes wide with both hope and fear, watching as the bikers prepared for action. Jack motioned to one of the bikers to stay behind with the girl while the others rode off toward the storage hatch. The scene was set. An unexpected rescue mission had just begun, and no one knew what would happen next. The crew was ready to face whatever danger awaited them, determined to save the person trapped in the dark depths beneath the gas station. I can hear the thunder of the engines roaring as Jack and the crew of bikers raced towards the gas station's storage hatch. The darkness of the night seemed to close in around them, but their determination kept them moving forward. The pavement under their tires cracked with each turn, and the rush of the wind made their faces feel like they were being slapped by the night itself. As they approached the gas station, Jack's mind raced. The young girl's plea echoed in his mind. Please, you have to help them. The urgency in her voice was like a weight on his chest, pushing him to go faster. They were just a few moments away from discovering what lay beneath that hatch. The crew was tight-knit, and despite the tension in the air, they were all ready for whatever awaited them. Jack glanced at the others, each one of them on high alert, their eyes scanning the surroundings as the headlights illuminated the gas station's grimy corners. The storage hatch was just ahead, its metal door barely visible beneath the dim light. Jack pulled his bike to a stop, the others following suit, and they dismounted quickly, already assessing the situation. One of the bikers, a large man, known as Bear, approached the hatch first. His boots thudded against the concrete, and the others followed, keeping their distance but ready for anything. Bear crouched down beside the hatch, his calloused hands gripping the cold metal handle. With a firm yank, the hatch groaned and creaked, resistance fighting back as if it didn't want to be opened. The air around them seemed to freeze for a moment, the only sound being the rustle of leaves in the wind. We need to get this open, Jack muttered. Now. With another forceful pull, Bear managed to lift the hatch just enough to peer inside. The darkness inside was overwhelming, but the faintest hint of movement could be seen deep within the hole. "I see something," Bear said, his voice low. "Someone's down there." The group exchanged quick looks, their hearts racing. The situation was becoming even more intense. Jack motioned for the others to spread out and form a perimeter around the hatch. They knew they couldn't trust anyone right now, not with the mystery unfolding right under their feet. One of the bikers, known as Thunder, was the first to move closer to the edge. He had a quiet intensity about him, always observant, never rushing into anything without fully understanding the risks. He crouched beside Bear, peering into the hole. "We have to get whoever that is out of there," Thunder said. "No time to waste." Jack nodded and turned to one of the bikers, a woman known as Raven, who had a reputation for her quick thinking in tense situations. "Raven, can you get us some light?" he asked. Without saying a word, Raven pulled out a flashlight from her bag, clicked it on, and handed it to Jack. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the depths of the hatch. It revealed a small figure huddled in the corner, their face hidden in shadows. But it was clear the person was in distress. "Who the hell are they?" Bear asked, his voice rough with uncertainty. "We'll find out soon enough," Jack replied, his eyes narrowing as he reached down to help pull the person out. Together, they managed to lift the small body from the hatch, the figure's arms weakly gripping the sides of the opening as they were pulled into the light. What they saw shocked them all. The person they had just rescued was a young woman, no older than 18, her clothes torn and covered in dirt. She was trembling, her eyes wide with fear as she looked up at the group of bikers. She didn't speak, but her eyes said everything. Jack knelt down beside her, his voice soft but firm. "You're safe now. We're going to help you." The young woman's lip quivered, and for a moment, it seemed like she might collapse into the dirt. But she held herself up, her breathing shallow, as if she were still too afraid to fully trust anyone. The bikers stood in silence, the weight of the situation sinking in. Who had done this to her? And why was she being kept beneath a gas station? It didn't make sense. But Jack knew they weren't going to get answers standing around. "We need to get out of here," Jack said, his voice full of authority. Now, as the bikers gathered around the young woman, they heard the faint sound of footsteps approaching. Someone was coming. The crew exchanged tense looks, but they didn't have time to wait for whatever was approaching. Jack turned to Bear and Thunder. "Get her to the bikes. We're leaving now." As they made their way toward the bikes, the tension was palpable. They didn't know who or what was coming, but they knew they couldn't stay here any longer. The mystery deepened, and so did their resolve. They had a person to protect and a mystery to solve, and the bikers weren't going to stop until they had answers. I can feel the tension building in the air as the bikers raced toward their destination, their engines roaring louder with each passing mile. The young woman, still trembling, clutched tightly to Jack's jacket as they made their way through the dark, desolate roads. She barely spoke, her silence adding to the heavy atmosphere. But Jack knew there was something more to her story. He had to find out what had happened. The night had fallen completely now, and the moonlight barely filtered through the thick clouds above. The crew was on edge, their nerves sharp, their senses heightened as they navigated through the quiet streets. Each biker kept watch, their eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of trouble. The young woman's body seemed to stiffen every time the group passed a shadow or a dark alley, as if she expected something, or someone, to jump out at them. Jack could feel her fear. He knew the world they lived in, the dangers that came with it, and how hard it was for someone like her to trust a group of strangers. But they had to protect her. They had made a promise to the little girl back at the gas station, and now it was up to them to keep it. They had to get answers. "We're almost there," Jack said, his voice steady, trying to comfort the young woman without overwhelming her. She nodded slightly, but the look in her eyes told him she was far from being at ease. The last thing she wanted was to be near people again, let alone strangers. As they pulled into the parking lot of a nearby motel, Jack parked his bike and quickly dismounted. He motioned for the others to gather around. The crew had made it clear there was no time to waste. "We need to figure out who's behind this," Jack said, his voice low but firm. "We need to know who took her and why." The bikers all nodded, their faces hardening as they prepared for what was to come. One of them, Thunder, stepped forward. "We can't just let her walk into the unknown. She needs help, and she's not telling us everything yet. We need to make sure she's safe first." Jack's eyes narrowed. He had a point. They had to be smart. There was a lot they didn't know about the girl's situation, but one thing was clear. Whatever was going on was far bigger than just a kidnapping. The girl was in danger, and they had to figure out how to protect her. Raven, who had been quiet up until now, spoke up. We should get her inside and let her rest. We can talk to her tomorrow, get more information. But right now, she needs to be safe. Jack agreed. The crew quickly set up a makeshift camp in one of the motel rooms. They weren't staying in luxury, just enough to keep the young woman out of sight and out of danger. As they prepared the room, Jack pulled Thunder aside. We need to keep a lookout. Someone's going to come looking for her. Thunder nodded, his face grim. I'll take the first shift. No one's getting past me. The hours dragged by slowly. As the crew kept watch over the motel room, their nerves on edge. The young woman barely spoke, only muttering softly to herself, as if the weight of the situation was too much to bear. Jack didn't push her to talk, though. He knew it would take time. As the night stretched on, a sudden knock at the door broke the stillness. The bikers tensed, their hands instinctively going for the weapons they kept close. Jack motioned for everyone to stay quiet as he approached the door. He peered through the peephole, his heart racing. It was a man, mid-40s, dressed in dark clothing. Jack's instincts told him this wasn't a man they could trust. Slowly, Jack opened the door just a crack. Can I help you? He asked, his voice guarded. The man's eyes flickered to the side, as if scanning for something or someone. I'm looking for a girl, the man said, his voice low. She was supposed to meet me. Have you seen her? Jack narrowed his eyes. Who are you? The man stiffened, his hand subtly shifting toward his pocket. I don't think that's any of your business. Jack could feel the tension rising. He wasn't about to let this man walk in, especially when he had no idea what his intentions were. I'm going to ask you again. Who are you? Jack's tone was cold now, and the man finally seemed to realize that he wasn't getting anywhere. Forget it, he muttered, turning and walking away without another word. Jack stood in the doorway for a moment, watching the man disappear into the night. Something wasn't right, and he knew that this was only the beginning. They had to act fast. Jack turned to the crew. Get ready. We're not letting anyone get near her. We need to move fast. It was clear now, there was more to this story than anyone had realized. The bikers weren't just protecting the girl anymore. They were hunting down something far more dangerous. The night was far from over. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on us as we gathered in the small, dimly lit motel room. The man's visit had sent a ripple of anxiety through the group. Who was he? Why had he been looking for the girl? Jack stood near the door, still watching the street outside through the crack in the blinds, his face set in a hard line. His instincts were screaming that something was off. We had come here to keep the girl safe, but now it seemed like we were walking into a much deeper and darker situation than we'd ever imagined. The rest of the crew was on edge. Thunder, who'd been on lookout, was pacing around the room. Raven was by the window, scanning the parking lot, her eyes narrowed in suspicion. This is bad, Thunder muttered under his breath. That guy's up to something. We can't let our guard down. Jack turned from the window, his expression steely. We won't. Keep an eye on the girl. No one gets near her. The girl, who had been sitting silently on the bed, looked up at him with wide eyes, fear still visible in her features. She was clutching her knees to her chest, her body tense. I could see that she was still terrified, but she was starting to show signs of trust, slowly letting her guard down. Jack approached her slowly, careful not to startle her. Hey, he said softly. We're going to figure this out. You're safe here. Just stay close to us. She nodded faintly, but she didn't speak. She still seemed so distant, as if the world she had been dragged into was too much for her to process. Jack returned to his position by the door, keeping watch. We were all restless, and the hours seemed to drag on in silence. It felt like we were waiting for something to happen, like a storm was building on the horizon, but no one knew exactly when or where it would hit. The motel was eerily quiet, save for the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional noise of cars passing by outside. Then, without warning, the sound of engines broke the silence. Low at first, like the rumble of distant thunder, but it grew louder, closer, until it was unmistakable, the unmistakable roar of motorcycles. Jack's head snapped toward the window. Get ready, he ordered, his voice low and tense. The sound of the motorcycles was growing nearer. I could see the shadows of headlights cutting through the blinds. Jack motioned for the crew to gather, his face hardening. Stay sharp. Whoever's coming, we don't know if they're here for us or the girl. Either way, we're not letting anyone take her." The rest of the crew immediately took their positions. Bear, Thunder, and Raven all moved to different corners of the room, ready to act at a moment's notice. The engines outside were deafening now. They stopped abruptly, just outside the motel. There was a long pause, the kind that felt like 1,000 years, before the sound of boots on pavement echoed through the walls. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. The door to the motel room suddenly rattled. Someone was trying to open it. Jack was the first to react, quickly crossing the room and locking the deadbolt. The noise on the other side of the door grew louder, as if the people outside were testing the door, pushing it, pulling at the handle. Jack turned to the rest of us. "Stay quiet," he whispered. The tension in the room was suffocating. It was like we were all holding our breath, waiting for the inevitable. The knocking stopped for a moment, and then a voice rang out. It was deep and steady, with an edge to it. "We know she's in there. Open up." The voice wasn't familiar. It wasn't the man from earlier, but it sent a chill down my spine just the same. Jack didn't move, his eyes scanning the group. Raven's fingers were clenched tightly around the flashlight, her knuckles white. "What do we do?" Thunder whispered, his voice tense. "We don't open the door," Jack replied, his tone cold and determined. "We're not giving them a chance to get in. We wait." The seconds seemed to stretch into eternity as we stood there, the silence in the room pressing down on us. The only sound was the pounding of our hearts and the low, threatening murmur of the men outside. "We don't know how many there are," Raven said, her voice barely audible. "We need to prepare." Jack nodded. "We'll make sure no one gets in. Stay focused." Suddenly, a new sound broke the tension. A car engine revved in the distance, followed by a screeching sound, like tires peeling out. The men outside hesitated for a moment, exchanging uncertain looks. Then, without another word, they turned and walked away, leaving only the sound of their footsteps echoing in the parking lot. Jack remained at the door for a moment, listening, his muscles still tense. Slowly, he turned back to the crew. "They're gone for now, but we can't let our guard down. They'll be back, and when they come, we'll be ready." We all nodded in agreement. The night wasn't over yet, and the danger was far from gone. We still didn't know who these people were, or what they wanted with the girl. But one thing was certain, this wasn't just about saving her anymore. It was about protecting each other. And we weren't going to back down. I could feel the tension easing for just a moment, but I knew it wouldn't last long. The bikers stood silent in the room, their eyes still scanning the windows, still ready for anything. It had been a while since those men had tried to break in, but their message was clear. We were being hunted, and so was the girl. Jack kept his gaze on the door, his hand resting on the handle of his bike, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was already thinking ahead, preparing for whatever came next. The crew had done their best to secure the place, but the uneasy feeling that lingered in the air told me this wasn't over. "We need to move. Now," Jack said, his voice low and commanding. It was more of a statement than a suggestion. He didn't wait for anyone to respond. He knew what had to be done. As the crew began to gather their things, the girl, still sitting quietly in the corner, glanced up at Jack. Her eyes were tired, heavy with fear, but there was something else there now, an unspoken understanding. She was beginning to realize that they weren't just some random bikers. They were her lifeline. "We'll get you to safety," Jack told her softly, but his tone was filled with authority. She nodded slowly, her small hands trembling, but she didn't speak. The crew quickly checked their gear. Thunder, Bear, and Raven were already outside, keeping watch. The rest of us followed Jack as he led the way out of the motel room, our bikes revving to life one by one. The engines roared to life, cutting through the still night air. As we moved, Jack took a deep breath, scanning the surroundings. The streets were quiet, but the air felt thick with anticipation. There was something in the air that told us we were being watched. The girl sat behind Jack, clutching his jacket, her grip tight, but she didn't seem to mind the speed. It was like she'd learned to trust him, learned to trust us. We moved quickly, turning down dark, quiet streets. The bikes were a blur, the headlights cutting through the dark as we tried to blend into the shadows. The world outside felt distant, like a dream. But I knew, deep down, that we were running out of time. The girl's presence, so fragile, was a constant reminder of the stakes we were facing. As we neared the outskirts of town, Jack made a sharp turn onto an isolated dirt road. The path was narrow, barely wide enough for our bikes to pass through. It was an area the crew had used before, far enough from the city to be hidden, but close enough to be a safe haven. The road was bumpy, and the bikes rumbled through the dust, but the silence between us was filled with purpose. The air had a strange weight to it now, and the darkness surrounding us seemed almost alive. Every passing moment brought us closer to the unknown, closer to whatever had been lurking beneath the surface of this entire situation. We needed answers. "We'll stop here," Jack said as he signaled to the crew. "Set up a perimeter. We're not letting anyone get close." We pulled off the road, the bikes settling down in a small clearing surrounded by dense trees. Jack's voice was calm, but there was a fierceness behind it that made the crew move with urgency. We worked quickly, setting up a guard, securing the area, and ensuring that no one could follow us here. Raven was the first to speak after everything settled. "We can't keep running forever. We need to find out who these people are, and we need to know why they're after her." Jack nodded, his face serious. "We will. But for now, we lay low. We get the girl some rest." The young woman still hadn't said much, but I could tell she was exhausted. The fear that had been visible in her eyes earlier seemed to have worn her down. She looked up at Jack again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Will they come for me?" Her words hit me harder than I expected. There was a vulnerability in her question, a childlike fear that none of us could ignore. Jack knelt beside her, his eyes softening. "We won't let them," he said firmly, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. The girl nodded, her lips trembling, but she didn't say anything else. She wasn't ready yet, and that was okay. We knew the answers wouldn't come quickly. Whatever was happening was far more complicated than we could have guessed, and it seemed like there was still more to uncover. As the night wore on, we took shifts keeping watch, the tension in the air growing thicker with each passing hour. The silence was oppressive, but it was also a sign that we had a moment of peace. The crew was alert, but we had no choice but to wait and see what the next move would be. Jack sat next to the girl, his posture relaxed but alert, watching the woods with a steady gaze. He wasn't just protecting her anymore. He was protecting all of us. There was a bond forming between them, something unspoken but undeniable. And I knew, whatever came next, we were in this together. We weren't backing down. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing on us as we stood in the clearing, the sound of the night around us muted by the tense silence between the crew. The plan was simple: stay hidden, keep the girl safe, and wait. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. The calm wouldn't last. The air felt charged, like before a storm. Jack's eyes never stopped scanning the trees, his body coiled tight with readiness. He wasn't the type to sit idly. He always had a plan, always knew what to do. But this was different. The girl, her fear, her silent suffering, was a constant reminder that we weren't just protecting her. We were up against something much bigger. Jack's voice cut through the quiet, low and serious. "We need to move. They're getting closer." Raven and Thunder exchanged a look, and I could see the same thought cross their minds. Whoever was after the girl wasn't backing off. They were closing in. "We don't have much time," Jack continued. "We've got to find out who's behind this, and we need to do it fast." The tension in the air thickened, but there was no time for hesitation. The crew sprang into action. Thunder and Bear went to check the perimeter, making sure we weren't being followed. Raven and I stayed close to Jack, helping to gather the girl's few belongings, preparing to move at a moment's notice. She hadn't spoken much since the night we'd rescued her. Her eyes were still full of that same haunted look, but there was something different now. A flicker of trust. She didn't pull away when Jack spoke to her, didn't flinch when the crew moved around her. She was starting to see us as something more than just strangers. A team. But it wasn't enough. We needed answers. "Stay close," Jack said to the girl, his voice soft but firm. "We're going to figure this out. You're safe with us, but we need to keep moving." The girl nodded silently, her eyes still wide, but no longer as fearful. She trusted Jack. She trusted us. We weren't sure what was going to happen next, but we knew one thing. Whatever it was, we would face it together. As we mounted our bikes and revved the engines, the roar of the motors filled the night, cutting through the stillness. We rode in formation, keeping close, always alert. Jack led the way, his mind working over the next steps. I could tell he was still thinking about the man who had knocked on the door earlier, the one who had come looking for the girl. Who was he? What did he want? And why hadn't he tried harder to get in? It didn't add up. The road was empty, the night air crisp, but the weight of what we were facing settled over us like a shadow. We were headed for a spot Jack had used before, a place to lay low, to regroup, to plan. The ride felt long, though it was only a few miles outside of town. The crew stayed close, no one saying much, all of us lost in our own thoughts. The girl sat behind Jack, her arms wrapped tightly around his waist, her head resting against his back. It was the first time she seemed truly relaxed, though the grip she had on his jacket was still tight, still holding on to the little security she could find. The trees around us grew denser as we moved further into the woods, the moonlight barely breaking through the thick canopy. Jack slowed down as we approached a secluded cabin. The place was hidden well, far off the beaten path, and it had been a long time since anyone had come here. This was where we would make our stand. Jack parked his bike and motioned for everyone to stay alert. This is where we lay low. We wait, we listen, and we keep an eye out. But we're not sitting ducks, he said. His voice was calm, but there was steel behind it. We're going to find out who's after her, and we'll deal with them. The girl got off Jack's bike, her legs shaky as she stood. She wasn't used to this life, but she was learning fast. Jack placed a hand on her shoulder, his eyes softening for a moment. Rest for a while. We'll figure this out, he said gently. She nodded, still silent. She was clearly exhausted, both physically and emotionally. The crew took positions, setting up lookouts, preparing for the next phase of whatever was coming. I could feel the intensity in the air, like the calm before the storm. Jack kept his distance from the girl for now, allowing her to rest, but his mind was clearly racing. I knew he was already planning their next move, thinking about the people who were after her, trying to piece together what had happened. What was their connection to the girl? Who were they, and what did they want? We couldn't afford to wait much longer. We needed answers, and we needed them fast. We weren't sure when the danger would come, but I could feel it in my gut. The worst was yet to come. I could feel the tension growing once again as we settled in at the cabin. The woods around us were quiet, eerily quiet, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there watching us. We had taken every precaution, setting up lookouts, securing the perimeter, but I knew that wouldn't be enough. The clock was ticking, and the people after the girl were getting closer. Jack's voice broke through the silence as he turned to the crew. We need to figure out who's behind this, and we need to move fast. Whoever these people are, they've been tracking her for a while. This isn't just some random attack. His words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of the unknown. The girl, sitting on a nearby log, looked up at Jack, her eyes still wide with fear, but there was something more in them now, something like determination. She had been through too much, seen too much, but she was still here, still fighting. Jack's gaze softened as he approached her, kneeling down in front of her. We're not going to let anyone hurt you, okay? He said, his voice calm, but full of conviction. The girl nodded, barely speaking, but her eyes said everything. She trusted him now, trusted us. And that meant everything. We're going to get you out of here, Jack said, standing up and turning to the rest of the crew. Thunder, Bear, check the perimeter again. Raven, stay with the girl. We can't afford any mistakes. The crew nodded, moving quickly to do as Jack instructed. The girl watched them for a moment, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. What do they want with me? She asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Jack paused for a moment, his eyes hardening. We don't know yet, he said, his tone grim. But we'll find out. And we won't stop until we do. The girl didn't respond, but I could see the fear in her eyes, the fear of not knowing what was coming next. It was a fear we all shared. As the crew set up their positions, I could feel the weight of the moment settling over me. We were all waiting for something. Waiting for the next move from the people hunting the girl, waiting for them to show their hand. The cabin felt like a trap, and the longer we stayed, the more exposed we became. Jack stood by the door, his eyes scanning the woods, always alert, always thinking. The night seemed to stretch on forever, the silence broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant howl of a wolf. Time was running out, and I knew we couldn't afford to stay here much longer. Jack was already making plans, formulating a strategy to track down the people behind this. I could see the fire in his eyes, the determination. He wasn't just going to let this go. He wasn't going to let them get away. We had one advantage, time. We had the element of surprise, and Jack was ready to use that to our benefit. "All right," Jack said suddenly, breaking the silence. "It's time. We're going to move out." He turned to the girl, his voice gentle. "We're going to get you to safety. Just stay close." The girl stood up slowly, her legs shaky, but there was a spark in her eyes now, a spark of trust and hope. She nodded, still clutching Jack's jacket as they made their way to the bikes. The crew gathered quickly, each of us checking our gear one last time. There was no turning back now. We were on the move. As we rode through the forest, the sounds of the night seemed to fade into the background. The bikes rumbled beneath us, the only sound besides the wind rushing past. But there was something in the air, something dark, something we couldn't quite put our finger on. We were getting closer, I could feel it. We were being watched, I was sure of it. Jack's eyes were sharp, his focus unwavering. He wasn't going to let anything slip past him. We continued down the winding roads, the trees closing in around us. The world outside felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. All that mattered now was the girl, her safety, her future, and we weren't going to let anyone take that away from her. As we approached a small, abandoned gas station on the outskirts of town, Jack motioned for us to slow down. The place looked deserted, but I could sense something was off. Jack gave a quick signal, and the crew spread out, covering the area. We moved quietly, our boots making no sound on the cracked pavement. Jack and I made our way to the front of the gas station, our eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. There was no sign of anyone, no indication of what we were looking for. But Jack's instincts told him we were close. "Stay sharp," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're here." We all paused, waiting for the signal. And then, as if on cue, the sound of tires screeching echoed through the night. Our eyes locked, and we knew it was time. The chase had begun. I could feel the tension rise as the sound of tires screeching grew louder, cutting through the night air like a warning. We all froze for a moment, eyes scanning the surroundings, waiting for the inevitable. The girl, still clutching Jack's jacket, pressed her face into his back, her breath shaky but steady. She didn't speak, but the grip she had on him told us everything. She was scared, but she trusted us now. Jack didn't flinch. His eyes narrowed as he studied the scene ahead, his mind working at lightning speed. He motioned for the crew to spread out, signaling us into position without a word. The crew moved in perfect unison, each of us taking our posts, ready to face whatever was coming. I could hear the distant rumble of engines, the growl of motorcycles approaching. They were closing in on us. We weren't just waiting anymore. We were going to confront whatever threat had been lurking in the shadows. Jack turned to me and gave a subtle nod. It was time. We were going to face the people who had been hunting the girl, the ones who had pulled her into this mess. "Stay sharp," Jack muttered under his breath, his voice steady but carrying an edge of urgency. "We don't know how many are coming, but we won't let them get to her." My heart was pounding in my chest, the adrenaline coursing through my veins, but I knew Jack was right. We had to protect her, no matter what. The engines roared louder, and the headlights of several motorcycles cut through the trees, illuminating the road ahead. It was them. Whoever they were here. The sound of tires screeching again echoed through the forest as they came to a halt just a few hundred feet away. The crew tensed, ready for whatever was next. "Everyone stay low," Jack ordered, his voice calm but commanding. We all dropped to the ground, crouching behind the trees and vehicles, staying out of sight. The only sound was the heavy breathing of the crew and the distant crackle of the night around us. The seconds stretched out, each one feeling like an eternity. We could hear footsteps now, slow, deliberate, like someone was taking their time, trying to find us. It was a cat-and-mouse game, and we had to be careful. I could see Jack's eyes flicker with focus, his body tense as he prepared for whatever confrontation was about to unfold. The footsteps grew closer. I held my breath, waiting for the first sign of movement. And then, there it was. A shadow moved between the trees, a figure stepping into view. The person was dressed in black, their face obscured by a helmet, but there was no mistaking the look of someone who had been trained for this kind of thing. The figure paused, scanning the area, and for a moment, it felt like they could see us. My heart raced, but Jack remained still, his eyes locked on the intruder. The figure started moving again, walking toward the cabin. Jack motioned to Thunder, signaling him to stay behind the cover of the trees while he and I would flank the intruder from the left. We were moving silently, our boots barely making a sound on the soft ground. I could feel the tension building as we got closer to the figure. We had to make our move, and we had to do it fast. Jack's signal came in a flash. Without a word, we sprang into action, rushing forward with precision. In one fluid motion, Jack grabbed the figure from behind, yanking them to the ground. The figure struggled, but Jack was too strong, too quick. Thunder moved in, grabbing the person's arms, forcing them into a restraint. The crew emerged from the shadows, surrounding the figure as they tried to break free. "Who are you?" Jack demanded, his voice low but firm. The figure, still struggling, grunted but didn't respond. Jack's grip tightened. "We know you're after the girl. You'll talk, or we'll make you talk." The figure's eyes flickered for a moment, but there was no fear in them, only calculation. "You have no idea what you're up against," the person hissed. "You're all dead." Jack didn't flinch. "Try me," he said, his tone cold. The figure fell silent, and for a moment, we were all on edge, waiting for their next move. And then, just as quickly as the confrontation had started, the figure seemed to relax, their body going limp. "You won't win this," they muttered, their voice barely audible. "They'll come for you." Jack leaned in closer, his face inches from the person's helmet. "Who?" he asked, his voice low and threatening. The figure's lips curled into a twisted smile. "You'll find out soon enough." Just as the figure finished speaking, the sound of more motorcycles echoed in the distance, growing louder with every passing second. They weren't alone. The real fight was coming, and we were about to be caught in the middle of it. Jack's eyes locked onto mine. "We move now," he said, his voice decisive. There was no more time to waste. We were running out of options, and whoever was coming didn't plan to stop until they got what they wanted. The crew immediately sprang into action, grabbing the girl and preparing to move. The fight wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. I could feel the adrenaline surge through my veins as we moved quickly through the trees, the sound of approaching motorcycles growing louder with every passing second. Jack's eyes were locked onto the figure they had just captured, but he wasn't interested in small talk anymore. His focus was razor-sharp, calculating every move we would need to make. "We don't have time for games," Jack muttered to the crew as they prepared to move. "We're not running from this." The crew nodded, all too aware of the stakes. The girl, still clinging to Jack's jacket, looked up at him, her expression no longer one of pure terror, but something else. Resignation, maybe hope. Jack motioned for the rest of the crew to keep the perimeter tight. We weren't about to be caught off guard again. The engines of the motorcycles outside were almost deafening now. The bikers had arrived, and we had no intention of letting them take the girl back. As we made our way to the cabin's back door, I could feel the tension building, and my mind raced. Who were these people? What did they want with the girl? There had to be more to the story, something deeper than we could see. But all of that would have to wait. Right now, we needed to focus on survival. Jack quickly pulled the girl inside, urging her to stay low, to stay quiet. The rest of the crew followed, their footsteps almost silent on the wooden floor. We could hear the muffled voices of the bikers outside, but they hadn't spotted us yet. I glanced back at Jack, who was already thinking 3 steps ahead. He was about to make his move, and we were all ready. The situation had shifted. Now, we weren't just protecting the girl. We were hunting down the people who had been hunting her. Jack motioned for Bear and Thunder to take positions by the windows, while Raven and I took our places near the back door. Every sense was on high alert. Every muscle was tense. We could hear the crunch of boots on gravel outside, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Jack's voice broke the silence. "We're going to make this fast," he said, his voice low and determined. "We don't let them get the girl, no matter what." We all nodded. There was no backing down. Outside, the motorcycles roared to life, and we knew it was time to move. Jack gave the signal, and we sprang into action. Bear and Thunder moved swiftly to the front, while Raven and I kept close to the girl. Jack was the first to step outside, his eyes scanning the area with practiced precision. We could see the group of bikers gathered around, their helmets gleaming under the dim light of the cabin. Jack didn't hesitate. He moved forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace, though I knew it was anything but. He wasn't looking for a fight, but he was ready for one if it came to that. "You're too late," Jack called out to the group, his voice cutting through the night air. The bikers turned, their eyes narrowing as they saw him. One of them, A tall man with a scar running down his face stepped forward. "You think you can protect her?" the man sneered. "She belongs to us. You have no idea who you're messing with." Jack didn't flinch. "She's not your property. She's a person, and if you want her, you'll have to go through us." The biker's eyes flashed with anger, but there was hesitation there too. "We don't want to hurt anyone," the scarred man said, though his voice lacked conviction. "But you're in over your head. This isn't just some street brawl." Jack's voice was steady as he took a step forward. "Then explain it to me," he said, his gaze never leaving the man's face. "Explain why you're after a young girl who hasn't done anything to you. What is it you really want?" The silence that followed was thick with tension. The bikers exchanged looks, their eyes flicking nervously toward the cabin. The girl, still hidden behind us, trembled slightly, but I could see the determination in her eyes. She wasn't going to be a pawn in someone else's game anymore. Jack's words had struck a chord. The scarred man looked ready to speak again when, suddenly, one of the bikers in the back of the group shouted, "We've got company." Panic swept through the group as more headlights appeared in the distance. They were closing in fast. We were about to be outnumbered. Jack quickly looked back at the crew. "Get to the bikes," he ordered. "We're not staying here." The crew was already moving, our bikes revving to life as we scrambled to get to safety. The girl was still clutching Jack, her eyes wide as the situation escalated. "You're safe," Jack promised her, his voice reassuring, though I could hear the urgency in it. We didn't have much time. As we rode off into the night, the engines of the pursuing bikers grew louder, but we had the advantage. We knew the terrain. We knew the shortcuts. But they were relentless. They weren't going to give up. And neither were we. I could feel the roar of the engines behind us, growing louder as we tore through the winding roads, the night air whipping against our faces. The pursuit wasn't slowing down. They were gaining on us, the headlights from their bikes flashing in the rearview mirrors like a constant reminder of the danger closing in. Jack's face was set in determination, his eyes scanning the road ahead, already planning the next move. The girl clung to him tightly, her small hands gripping his jacket as the wind howled around us. She didn't speak, but I could feel the weight of the fear she was carrying, the fear that had been building inside her for who knows how long. She wasn't the only one afraid. Every single one of us knew what was at stake now. This wasn't just a chase. This wasn't just about saving her anymore. This was about survival. Jack's voice crackled through the intercom. "We need to split up. They can't catch all of us." The plan was risky, but it was the only choice we had. "Thunder, Bear, head down Route 19. Raven, take the forest road. I'll lead them up ahead, get them to follow me. You know what to do." The crew responded in unison, their voices steady despite the tension. They were ready. We were ready. We didn't have much time. I glanced over at Jack. He was already making his move, leaning into his bike, speeding up as we rounded a sharp turn. The headlights from the pursuing bikers were just behind us now, but Jack was gaining ground. It wasn't long before I could hear the distant sound of their engines echoing through the night, like a pack of wolves hunting their prey. But Jack wasn't about to be the prey. As we hit a straight stretch of road, Jack veered off to the left, taking a narrow, overgrown trail that led into the woods. It was dangerous, but it was the perfect way to shake off our pursuers. The rest of us followed, taking the same turn, weaving through the trees as the ground beneath us became uneven. I could feel the tension in the air, the dust kicking up behind us as we raced through the forest, pushing our bikes to their limits. The trees closed in around us, their branches scraping against our gear, but we didn't slow down. We couldn't. The sound of the motorcycles behind us faded for a moment, and I thought maybe, just maybe, we had lost them. But I didn't dare look back. The road ahead was filled with twists and turns, each one more treacherous than the last. It was a battle to keep the bike steady, but we were doing it. Then, a sudden crackle through the intercom. "They're still on us," Raven's voice said, sharp with urgency. "They're catching up. We need to get out of here." I could hear the strain in her voice, the desperation. It was clear we couldn't keep this up for long. Jack's voice came through next, calm but firm. "Stay focused. We've got one more turn. Head toward the old bridge. It's our best shot." The old bridge. It was an abandoned structure deep in the woods, a place most people didn't even know existed anymore. But Jack knew it like the back of his hand. It was the perfect place to make our stand. We pushed the bikes harder, the sound of our engines ripping through the night, the roar echoing off the trees. The girl behind Jack clutched him even tighter, her face buried against his back, but I could see a flicker of trust in her eyes. She was with us now, and we weren't going to let anyone hurt her. The old bridge came into view ahead, barely visible through the thick canopy of trees. We were getting close, but just as we reached the bridge, a sound that made my heart drop. More motorcycles. They were right behind us, too close now. They weren't giving up. Jack didn't hesitate. He slammed on the brakes, his bike skidding to a stop just at the edge of the bridge. The crew followed suit, coming to a halt just behind him. We were at the bridge, but the bikers were right there. They were closing in fast. I could see them now, their headlights cutting through the dark like predators circling their prey. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here for the girl, and they were willing to do anything to get her back. Jack stood up from his bike, his face hardening. He wasn't going to let them take her. "You made a mistake following us," he said, his voice cold and controlled. "Now, you're going to pay for it." The group of bikers dismounted, their eyes fixed on us. The leader, the scarred man from earlier, stepped forward. His face twisted into a grin. "You think you can stop us? We'll take her, one way or another," he sneered. Jack didn't flinch. "Not today," he replied, his hand resting on the handle of his bike, ready for whatever came next. The standoff between us and the bikers was thick with tension. The air felt heavy, like something big was about to happen. And I knew, without a doubt, that this was it. The moment of truth. The fight had come, and we weren't going to back down. I could feel the air around us thick with anticipation. The scene on the old bridge was set. The bikers were closing in, their eyes locked on us with determination. The scarred man stepped forward, his posture aggressive, his hands clenched into fists as he glared at Jack. "You think you can stop us?" the scarred man sneered. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Jack didn't budge, his eyes unwavering, his hands still resting on the bike, as though the tension between them didn't faze him. "You're not taking her," Jack said, his voice steady but laced with authority. "Not now? Not ever." The scarred man's expression twisted, his anger rising. He motioned to his group of bikers, who had been waiting for their leader's signal to move. "She belongs to us, and you don't get to decide who gets her," the scarred man spat. Jack's voice was calm, but there was a fierceness in it that made everyone around him take notice. "She's not a possession. She's a person, and you're about to find out just how far we're willing to go to protect her." The silence between us and the bikers was broken only by the sound of our bikes rumbling in the background. It felt like the world was holding its breath, waiting for the first move. But none of us moved. We were ready. We were not backing down. The scarred man raised his hand, a signal for his crew to get ready. I could see the shift in their posture, the change in their eyes. They were ready for a fight, and they were expecting us to back down. But we weren't backing down. Suddenly, one of the bikers in the back of the group made a move, reaching for his jacket. The rest of the bikers followed suit, their hands moving to their weapons. Jack's hand shot out like a strike of lightning, his voice low but firm. "Don't make me repeat myself," he warned. The tension in the air was palpable now, the weight of what was about to happen settling heavily on all of us. The scarred man's eyes flicked to his crew, and for a moment, I thought he might back down. But he didn't. He grinned, his eyes full of menace. "You want to protect her? Fine," he said, his voice dripping with malice. "But you won't make it out of here alive." He swung his arm in a sharp motion, and in an instant, the bikers were on the move. The air exploded with the sound of engines roaring, tires screeching on the gravel. The crew sprang into action, moving swiftly into position. Raven, Thunder, and Bear took their places, ready for anything. Jack didn't hesitate. He moved quickly, pulling the girl close to him as he ran toward cover, signaling the rest of us to follow. The gunshots rang out before we even had a chance to fully react. We hit the ground, taking cover behind the trees, the sound of bullets whizzing past us like angry bees. "Stay down," Jack shouted. "We're not letting them take her." We moved quickly, staying low, working together as a unit. Raven covered the left side, her eyes scanning the bikers' positions. Thunder and Bear took the right, making sure no one was getting behind us. Jack stayed close to the girl, making sure she was protected. The fight was fast and brutal. The bikers didn't hesitate. They were in it to win it, and they weren't holding back. But neither were we. The girl's fear was palpable, but there was something else there too. I could see it in her eyes now. She was no longer just a victim. She was starting to fight back, starting to understand that she had people who would protect her no matter what. The bikers advanced, their guns raised, but Jack wasn't backing down. He moved swiftly, taking down one of the bikers with a well-placed kick, while the rest of us kept the others at bay. The sound of gunfire was deafening, but Jack's voice cut through it all. "Get to the bikes. We need to move." We didn't need to be told twice. The crew sprang into action, heading for the bikes. But just as we were about to make our move, a new sound filled the air, the sound of more motorcycles. They were coming from the other side of the bridge. The situation had just gone from bad to worse. "They've got reinforcements," Raven shouted. "We're surrounded." Jack's eyes flicked over the scene, his mind working faster than anyone could follow. "We make our stand here," he said, his voice calm and determined. "We don't back down." We gathered around Jack, our bikes ready, prepared to fight until the very end. The bikers closing in on us didn't hesitate. They weren't interested in negotiating. They were here to take the girl, no matter the cost. And we weren't going to let that happen. Jack turned to the girl, his expression softening for a moment. "Stay behind us," he said, his voice low. "We're going to protect you. No matter what happens, you're safe with us." The girl nodded, her eyes wide but filled with determination. She was no longer just a bystander. She was part of this fight, and we weren't going to let her face it alone. The fight was just beginning, and we were ready. The sound of engines revving grew louder as the bikers circled us, their headlights slicing through the dark, casting long shadows on the worn-out bridge. We had reached the point of no return. The girl stood behind Jack, her body trembling, but her eyes now burning, with the same fire that fueled the rest of us. The fight wasn't just about protecting her anymore. It was about survival, ours and hers. Jack's face was calm, but his eyes were hard, focused on the group of bikers surrounding us. He wasn't just the leader of this crew. He was the wall between the girl and whatever these people had planned for her. "We're not backing down," Jack said, his voice low but full of steel. "We're here to finish this." The rest of the crew, crouched behind their bikes and makeshift cover, nodded in agreement. Each of us knew the stakes. We weren't just facing bikers anymore. We were facing a force, something more organized than just a gang on the run. The scarred leader stepped forward again, his eyes gleaming with malice. "You think you've won? This isn't over. You don't get to decide who lives and who dies," he sneered. "This girl isn't yours to protect." Jack didn't flinch. "She's not yours to take," he shot back, his tone sharp, filled with unshakable resolve. "And we're not going anywhere until we get answers." The scarred man laughed, a bitter, cold sound that seemed to echo in the stillness of the night. "You have no idea what's coming. You think you can stop us? We'll make sure you regret this." At that moment, we heard it, more engines. The sound of tires screeching, the ground shaking as reinforcements arrived. The bikers had more backup, and now we were truly surrounded. Jack raised his hand, signaling to the crew. "We fight," he said, his voice calm, almost like he was giving an order for a ride. The crew stood ready, weapons now in hand, poised to defend the girl and themselves. "Stay close to me," Jack told the girl, his voice soft but firm. "We won't let them hurt you. Not tonight." The girl nodded, her face pale but determined. There was no more fear in her eyes. Now there was only a quiet strength. The bikers approached, getting closer with every passing second. But we were ready. As the first biker neared, Jack stepped forward, his fist connecting with the man's jaw, sending him crashing to the ground. The rest of the crew erupted into action, moving quickly, taking down the bikers one by one. The sounds of grunts and fists hitting flesh filled the air, the crunch of metal against stone as bikes were knocked over, but we weren't backing down. Thunder and Bear fought side by side, their massive frames an unshakable force as they took on two of the bikers at once. Raven was fast, moving with precision, taking out the others with swift blows. She was a blur of motion, and the bikers were no match for her speed. I stayed close to Jack and the girl, watching their backs, making sure no one got close to her. Jack was relentless, his eyes cold as he moved through the chaos, taking down anyone who tried to get too close. He wasn't stopping, not until the girl was safe. We were in the middle of it now. No more games, no more waiting. The bikers were still coming, but they were starting to fall back. They didn't expect this level of resistance. The scarred leader, seeing his crew being outmatched, yelled, "Fall back. This isn't over." The remaining bikers hesitated for a split second, But the damage had been done. They had underestimated us, and now they were retreating, pulling back to regroup. Jack didn't chase them. He didn't need to. He had done what he came to do, protect the girl, and make sure she stayed safe. As the last of the bikers disappeared into the woods, Jack turned to the girl, his face softening for the first time since this entire ordeal had started. "You're safe now," he said, his voice reassuring. The girl looked up at him, her eyes still wide, but no longer filled with fear. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Jack nodded, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to thank us. You're family now, and we protect our own." The crew gathered around, each of us catching our breath, checking for injuries, making sure we were all in one piece. The fight wasn't over, but we had won this round. And as the sounds of the retreating bikers faded into the distance, the weight of everything that had happened seemed to lift, even if just for a moment. We had fought for her, and we had made sure no one would harm her again. For the first time in a long time, the world seemed a little quieter. Jack turned back to the girl, his voice steady. "You're safe now. You don't have to run anymore." The girl looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something more, hope. The night had been long, but it was over, and we had won. In this gripping tale of loyalty and survival, we follow a group of bikers, united under the banner of protection, as they face overwhelming odds to save a young girl from a dangerous gang. The thrilling ride through dark forests, intense confrontations, and powerful moments of courage are at the heart of this story, a true reflection of what it means to fight for family, no matter the cost. The Hell Angels stories tell us about camaraderie and resilience, where no matter how much darkness surrounds them, they stand strong to protect those who need them most. As the bikers gear up for battle, they are driven by a promise made long ago, and with every turn, every fight, they prove that family comes first. With each action-packed moment, the true power of brotherhood is revealed, showing us what happens when these warriors of the open road go to great lengths to shield someone in need. The Hell Angels stories bring us face to face with the raw reality of the world they live in, where survival is not a choice, but a necessity. The chase is on, and with every engine roar and dust cloud, we dive deeper into a world where loyalty is tested, and heroes emerge from the most unexpected places. In this journey, we see not only the physical strength of these bikers, but also the emotional depth of their commitment to protecting the innocent. The Hell Angels stories are a reminder of the lengths people will go to when they are bound by loyalty, and this chapter shows just how far a biker will go to ensure the safety of one of their own. With every twist and turn, the stakes get higher, and the question remains, can they outsmart their relentless pursuers? The answer lies in their hearts, their resolve, and their willingness to face whatever comes their way, all for the sake of protecting the vulnerable. The Hell Angels stories will forever remain a testament to the strength of those who stand together when the world seems to be closing in.